Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Avery Dennison's webinar focusing on how to choose the right adhesive for your application. Well, thank you very much for your interest. We really appreciate your time. As you can see, we're still working from home, so we hope there are no unplanned interruptions, but just in case that happens, please bear with us. Before I introduce our speakers, I wanted to share a few housekeeping rules with you. So first of all, you will receive the slide deck of today's presentation later in the day, and you will also receive a recording. We strongly encourage you to ask questions throughout the session. We disable the chat on the right-hand side, just not to interrupt the presentation, but you can type in your questions once you scroll down below the presentation deck. You can see questions there. You can type them in there. We'll try to answer as many as possible today. And we'll be also sharing polls with you. So we'll let you know once the polls are live, and we'll ask you to answer them. Please keep in mind that both questions and polls are public. So that's it from me. I would like to now introduce the speakers. We've got René van der Graaf with us, who is Senior Principal Scientist with Avery Dennison, and Natalia Malhanova, Marketing Manager, Select Solutions, also with Avery Dennison. Thank you. Enjoy your session. Over to Natalia.
Thank you very much, Justina. Good morning, good afternoon. From wherever you are joining us, thank you very much for spending some of your time with us today. We will speak with René about the topic of adhesives. And here you can see the three main subtopics that we would like to bring to your attention. First, how are self-adhesive labels, or specifically the adhesives for those, are being made? We will introduce you to the technological capabilities and to establish just the basis. Where do we start with? Then we will walk you through the trends in adhesive innovation and talking about trends today, but also what do we see being the trends going forward. And last but not least, René will walk you through the list of very important criteria, selection criteria. Those will help you to guide your journey of adhesive selection through the big portfolio, large portfolio that either we or anybody else on the market has. These are critical questions to ask to your customers, to brand owners if you are a label printer, or if you are a brand. These are the critical questions you need to provide to your customers or to your suppliers in order to have the best combination of the label material connected to the best choice of adhesive. We decided to spend this hour on the topic of adhesives. So it is clearly rather important for us. At the same time, we know from the experience that sometimes the role of the adhesive is underestimated. Sometimes when you have a final product design in mind, adhesive is an invisible element, right? Because in the end, what you see is a beautiful printed design, a beautiful shape of a label on a product. What you don't see is that invisible element that holds the label on the packaging, on the bottle, for instance, on a cardboard box, whatever you choose it for. That invisible element is very critical because if it fails, potentially the label will fall off and then the complete product fails. So adhesive is a connector. You can think of it as a connector connecting a product with the label, with the information, branding, the design, whatever you have on the label, together with the product itself. So it is a very important element. At Avery Dennison, we started the adhesive journey a long time ago, as you can see, with our founding father, Stanton Avery, who invented the first self-adhesive label. And we have been focusing on adhesive development ever since. What is interesting is that at Avery Dennison, we have a dedicated facility plant where we manufacture, produce, design our adhesives. And this is very helpful to be, of course, quick and agile to requirements of our customers. So let me walk you through the process of making an adhesive. But before that, a quick reminder. when we have global customers and global brands, they usually ask for a same type of product or performance across regions. And is only possible if we tap into the database of scientists that we have and adhesive engineers across different parts of the world. Because, you know, in the end, an application can be rather similar. You can have, let's say, a pharmaceutical line, or you can have a bottling line. And the application is, you can say, the same, but conditions can be very different. And these conditions will impact, in the end, the choice of the adhesive and the choice of the label. Renee is one of the 400 plus scientists in this group who are connecting, interacting with each other to understand the peculiarities of every region, and then to suggest either a similar type of adhesive to be used. Sometimes even we have a global adhesives that are performing similar way across regions, or to suggest an adhesive that really fits the specific requirements of that specific region. Without further ado, there are three main adhesive coating technologies you could choose from. Or you can say even broader, these three technologies are the only one available on the market. At Avery Dennison, we have all three in-house. So emulsion, hot melt, and solvent, all the three coating technologies are available in our network of plants in Europe. And this is unique for the industry. We are not aware of any other company that is able to have all the three and access to all the three. So when we manufacture an adhesive, we make use of one of them. And when we do that, we then dive into the chemical composition. We choose an adhesive to be either acrylic or rubber-based. So the chemistry is a second step after the coating technology. What you can see is that within each and every coating technology, we can have acrylic or rubber-based adhesive. But specifically within a solvent coating technology, we saw the rise of two more chemistries, hybrid and silicone. Hybrid, it's, you can say, the best of two worlds. It's a combination between acrylic and rubber. And these are the type of adhesives that ensure a very good adhesion to very difficult, sometimes even contaminated surfaces. Think about durable segment or maybe automotive. Silicone is another example of a solvent adhesive. And this is really the adhesive where we saw a need for it or development for it when we faced a very challenging surface being silicone. In the end, only silicone can stick to silicone, and that is the reason why this adhesive was born. If you go a level deeper within each acrylic or rubber-based type of chemistry, we can define adhesive to be either permanent, stick until the lifetime of the product, until the end of lifetime of the product, or removable. And removable can be to remove on demand. For instance, if you have a barcode label identifying a product, or if you would have a performance of reclosability, or it's also known as a peel and reseal performance, where you would need a multiple opening and reopening of the pack. Then you have many more layers to add, and this is added with the chemistry to it, because potentially you would like your adhesive to be able to withstand a pasteurization process. Or maybe you need an adhesive that would help your compostability efforts to, for instance, support industrial composting. Or maybe you require a wash-off performance in cold temperature or in a caustic bath. Or maybe you need an adhesive that has some sustainability elements. So these are additional questions that come afterwards. What you see on the slide is really the groundwork, the basis. This level of customization of different possibilities has led to the fact that we have more than 160 adhesives in Europe only. And in order to make it easy to understand and also to understand the differences between these three coating technologies and chemistries, we've created three animations. For the sake of time and for the interest of yours, we will include a link later, but also in this presentation, you have a link to the adhesive webpage. And there you can find 3 animations that explain in more details peculiarities of each and every technology, chemistry, from the moment of creating an adhesive till the moment of applicating on actual product. Also connecting the different type of compliance-related questions. So if you would have interest for that, I really encourage you to look into these animations. When we engineer an adhesive, when we start an adhesive development, we always do that with application in mind. So we start, for instance, with a question, where are you going to use this adhesive or this label? Is it something that you would like to utilize in your pharmaceutical product line? Or is it for a durable application, for instance, for a car interior? Or maybe in times of COVID, now we saw an increase in the need for security solutions to protect the integrity, the safety, for instance, of food. So security solution, that's another type of adhesive, a strong adhesive that you would require. Wine and spirits, another segment that also potentially needs adhesive that is gives a really good performance in the ice bucket challenge, or in the when you need a label to still remain a nice texture and whiteness. Adhesive is very critical element in these different segments, and for that reason we also have actually dedicated teams of product managers and research and development colleagues who are looking into the full spectrum of products for those specific applications. So if you answer a question, where are you going to use this adhesive, this label for, we can also give you maybe some more additional information to what is there available, or what are the regulations that you need to comply with, and to give you a bit more guidance in that. So when we know the application, that's the first step. The next 2 are just as important. So where are you going to stick your label to? The surface that you are labeling is important. And the second point is the temperature. And here we are talking about application temperature, the moment you apply your label on a product, but also service temperature. This is the moment, the temperature that your product is exposed to after label has been applied. And Renee will go in depth there. These are very critical moments. So the application, temperature, and surface to be labeled. And now I would really love to get a bit more a flavor of our participants, to learn from you what are your experiences with adhesives. Justina has kindly shared some polls with you. So if you could please answer. If not, if you cannot find them, maybe Justina, you can walk through the process of finding them.
Yes, absolutely.
Justina,
so yes, we've just shared polls with you. You are able to see them once you scroll down below the screen. So next to the question box, you can click polls, and you can see 3 questions popping up. So the first one is, what challenge do you face when selecting an adhesive for an application? So please vote now. And we also have 2 following questions, which is, which functionality are you missing in the adhesives you use? And the third one, which applications require your knowledge of adhesives? So please, if you can spend 2 minutes to quickly answer the questions, that would be much appreciated. Thank you. We've got some first feedback, Natalia, if you want to.
Yeah, I would like to invite Renee. I mean, these virtual sessions are something new for us as well, and I think it's nice that we get to interact a bit more, right? Renee, tell me, from your experience, based on the answers on the first poll, what do you see there?
Yes, Natalia, thank you. And the question of the poll was, what challenge do you face when selecting an adhesive for an application? And in fact, we have a near tie for the winner, and that is number 1, the demands from the customer side are unclear, or they are very demanding. And second, the second one is difficult surfaces to be labeled. I will definitely cover the difficult surfaces to be labeled, and I will also touch upon demanding requirements from customers. Unfortunately, I cannot comment on the unclear requirements for from customers. But I can imagine that this is extremely hard when it comes to choosing the right adhesive.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Renee. Indeed, unclear requirements, that's something they also come to us. This is the moment where our sales force is also struggling, because if you have unclear requirements and we get them back through our sales force, what would be the quality of response? So I think we need to push ourselves a bit more to get these insights. And at least with this presentation, I hope you will have at least the basic questions you need to ask and request and information from your customer on. Here we have created for you a directional comparison. When you combine a specific coating technology with specific chemistry, what type of performance will you get out of it? Again, this is a very directional one. It's not holy grail, but it gives you at least an idea to how the technology and chemistry impact the performance. On the left side, you see different criteria we select to share with you. But of course, there are many more that you could put into this rationale and then make the best choice. What we've tried to do is, with the three dark circles, we've identified the best performance. And just to give you an example, if you are working with a very, and we had this question just now, very difficult surfaces to be labeled, most probably you will be better off in a choice on the far right side in a solvent rubber or solvent acrylics, because these are excellent adhesives for high tech on difficult surfaces. Interestingly enough, and we've included some examples of adhesives. So for those who work with us, potentially you recognize the adhesive names. Within solvent rubber, we have one adhesive, which is R100, and that's actually a removable adhesive. So on one side, you can get a really very good adhesion from a permanent adhesives, or in this case, the best smooth removability when it comes to removable adhesive. So this direction, you need to think about it a bit in a mirror look when you compare permanent and removables. On the other side of the spectrum, if you are producing for a high-speed labeling line, name it a beer or maybe a shampoo bottle, there you potentially require a really trouble-less converting dispensing during the high speed. Potentially, you need even a food approval for that product, which we saw being a question for different applications, not even related to food. And potentially, you also are careful on the cost side. So there, emulsion acrylic would be the best choice for you. And also at the same time, I saw there was a question, one of the questions asked, what about water-based acrylics? So I assume you're referring to emulsion acrylics. This is what we call water-based ones. And if not, this is not the case, do please comment and we will provide a further answer on that. And I would love to touch also the middle part. So let's look, for instance, at hot melt rubber. What you can see there, you can see an excellent tech, but also you can see there an excellent low temperature performance. This is the typical, and there I have an example of S2045N. This is the typical adhesive that is very good for chilled food labeling, for instance. And this is the typical adhesive where you still have high tech, even in the conditions where potentially a condensation is present. So Renee, I would love to spend another moment then to look at the second poll responses, because there was a question connected to this topic of functionality, right? Could you please comment what results did we get out of there?
Yeah, the question of the second poll was, which functionality are you missing in the adhesive you use? And there we have 2 points that come out most prominent. The first one is durability of the material, of the adhesive, and the second one is compostability. On the durability side, I can point you to a special place on our website where we have a complete section on durable adhesives for the many segments that we supply adhesives for.
Thank you very much, Renee. And then let's look then at the trends and adhesive innovations. Potentially now in the time of COVID, you could feel that all together jointly we have made a step back when it comes to sustainability, because we saw quite an increase in the usage of pre-packed food finally, or single-use plastic even, which was totally not the direction we were going for. But it was a necessary way to protect well-being and health of all of us. We do believe this is a temporary situation, because what we see is that more and more sustainability efforts are important, and more now than ever, we still have the same planet, nothing changed there, right? So we still need to keep on working on the best solutions we can think of as industry that are having a positive impact on sustainable developments. So when we look at today and at the future, these three are the key trends we are confident will continue when it comes to adhesive development, or when it comes to self-adhesive label constructions development. So first is sustainability, then functional packaging, and legislation or compliance. If we look at sustainability, the two examples I wanted to highlight is the clean flake adhesive, of course, the SR3011. That's adhesive that we have developed specifically for the labeling of PET bottles and containers. This adhesive, or its key function, is to enable clean removability from the PET bottle in the recycling process, in the bottle-to-bottle recycling process. This is an innovation that we launched a few years ago, but this is clearly the innovation that saw its rise the moment public opinion and governmental opinion focused its work on the recycling efforts. So definitely a very good example of sustainable development in terms of adhesives. Clear Cut, that's another example, S7000 range, we call that as well. This is an adhesive that we launched with thin materials, thin filmic materials. Think of polypropylene 50 micron face and PET 23 liner. This is the typical construction this adhesive is offered with, where we promise the convertibility or the feeling that you get when running this material on par with the thicker constructions that you are used to. So think about PP, polypropylene 60 micron, opposite to PP 50. So these two are one of many. Also in compostable developments, I saw the comment from Renee. There are solutions that we offer to the market, and if you have more interest in that, do please reach out. The second trend is functional packaging. Functional packaging is a second name for self-adhesive label and for adhesive itself, because without functionality, I mean, what is the use of that label in the end, right? The two examples I have here are connected to removability. I'm sure, I'm 100% confident, then maybe even everybody on this webinar has experienced frustration when removing a label from your electronic appliances or from your cup or small plate that you bought for your beautiful dining table. And this happens when the wrong adhesive was chosen for that specific application. So in our case, R100 mentioned before, adhesive, an innovation that is there for a long time, but still performs really superior when it comes to clean removability from different surfaces. And another example is more recent. It's an adhesive that MR980R, adhesive that is really strong when it comes to withstanding the chemicals inside the packaging, inside the wet wipes packaging. Again, coming back to COVID, we saw an increase in consumer spending and consumer demand for hygiene, products of hygiene, products to protect, to ensure cleanliness of house, or potentially for personal care. So this is the typical adhesive that is used in the wet wipes packages for household applications, where the chemicals are strong, but the adhesive is stronger to enable still repeated open-close functionality of a label. And last but not least, legislation, or we call it also compliance. This is a separate topic on itself. We have a dedicated compliance team who are looking, proactively looking into different changes, legislational changes that are happening to understand what type of product development or product modifications are needed. Here I have two examples for you. One is connected to the legislation by the pharmaceutical industry, specifically the Falsified Medicine Directive, where the goal was to have a packaging protected with a label that would ensure integrity of the pack. And this specific adhesive is so strong that when trying to remove it from the packaging, you will definitely damage the pack and you will show that the product was falsified or tampered with. So this is really an important topic, important trend, the trend that we follow really closely. Another example, I don't have it here, but this is definitely an example that touches adhesive development, is, for instance, REACH compliance. REACH compliance for us is a must, and that's something that our teams are looking into when the chemicals are changing or where there are other developments in different regions. So this is legislation, again, is key. And another example I have here, adhesive, I suppose if you work with us, you definitely know S692N, that's adhesive with a very good food approval, specifically direct food approval, fatty food approval, that is used for a wide range of applications. So before we move to the second part of this webinar, where René will dive into more details around adhesive choice, I would love to have a look at the outcome of the third question. René, if you could please comment. And I think there is a mute button still not working.
My apologies. Thank you, Natalia.
Yes.
Yes, the final question of the polls was which functionality are you missing in the adhesive of use? Oh, no, my apologies. The final question was, of course, which applications require your knowledge of adhesive? And here, by far the mostly clicked answer was food. And we certainly recognize this answer or this trend. We get a lot of questions with regards to labeling of food products. And in my part of this webinar, I will touch upon this topic as well.
Thank you very much, René. And I would welcome you to continue with the second part with the adhesive selection criteria.
Thank you, Natalia. Good morning, everybody. Today, I'm going to talk to you about adhesives, and in particular, how adhesives work and what are the key criteria for you to consider when selecting an adhesive. First of all, let's look at the basics of what is happening when an adhesive is sticking to a substrate. Basically, the adhesive is clearly already bonded to the face stock. And this can be a paper, this can be a film, this can be anything. The adhesive itself has a certain internal strength, and we refer to this as the cohesion of the adhesive. This is a very important criteria for an adhesive. If the adhesive then first comes into contact with the substrate, it basically is able to touch immediately and stick to the peaks of the substrate. And this initial adhesion, which is referred to as tag, is really depending upon the roughness of the surface of the substrate, obviously, as well as the strength of the adhesive. And then finally, when the adhesive has had some time to flow or wet onto the substrate, we speak about the final adhesion. And this final adhesion is really governed by three basic criteria. One of them is obviously the strength of the adhesive itself. The second one is the polarity of the substrate. And finally, the ability of the adhesive to flow onto the substrate. And I will discuss these points in more detail in the following slides. If you look at the selection criteria, then we roughly consider four key ones to consider: the application itself, the surface to be labeled, the temperature conditions, and finally, special adhesive requirements. If we look at the first one, the application, then these are really the points which are important for the end use. So are we talking about a paper face stock or are we talking about a film? This matters a lot for the adhesive because when we have a film adhesive, often there are requirements on the clarity of the adhesive, as well as, for example, the UV resistance of the adhesive. On paper, we often have a lot more leeway in the adhesive to work with special adhesives, which have very high tech, are not necessarily clear, but because they don't have to be clear in these applications. Furthermore, on the application side, it's important to consider special criteria such as wash-off requirements. This obviously brings us to a completely different set of adhesive options than you would, for example, with a clear-on-clear product for a beer application. Then the next topic is very important, and this is what also came back from the polls: the surface to be labeled. And here we basically talk about two criteria, which I will cover later on. One of them is the polarity, and the second one is the roughness of the substrate itself. The third criteria is the temperature. Again, this is very important for the choice of the right adhesive. And here we will look at why an adhesive sticks and at what conditions the adhesive sticks best. And then finally, we talk about the special adhesive requirements. Natalia already covered some of these, for example, removability, which is very important. But in some cases, we have requests for a special sound that the adhesive makes when the adhesive is being removed from a surface, or how many times the adhesive can be used in a reclosure application. And finally, compliance. We got this back from the poll as well from you. Compliance is getting ever more important in the choice of the right adhesive, and particularly the food regulations are on the one hand very important for the end user, but they are also, let's say, causing restrictions on how we develop and market our adhesives. So this is clearly a very big topic of our research as well. So let's look at the surface to be labeled first. Like I said, there are two key criteria to consider. On the one hand, we have the roughness of the surface, and on the other hand, we have the polarity. So let's first start with the roughness piece. Basically, what you see here is a number of typical applications which are ranging from very easy, so smooth surfaces, all the way up to, let's say, challenging or very difficult surfaces. You can imagine if a substrate is smooth, it's relatively easy for the adhesive to stick to because it just needs to flatten itself out onto a smooth surface. On the other hand, if you have a very rough surface, such as wood, carpets, or pellets, then the adhesive needs to do a lot more work to, let's say, flow into the valleys of the substrate. And if you even take it further to the right, then we talk about contaminated surfaces with, for example, dust and oil, but also moisture can be seen as a contamination to some extent when we are applying an adhesive to a substrate. And then obviously on the very right-hand side, we talk about very difficult substrates such as hot metals and silicon rubbers. And the silicon rubber brings me to a very important criteria which I would like to explain in more detail, and that is the polarity of a substrate. Basically, we can consider two extremes, and I will show you that in the next slide. Here we have a number of substrates which are represented by the white circles, and these range in polarity from very polar here on the left to very apolar on the right. And on these substrates we are putting droplets of water. Now if we go to the very right hand side of the picture here, we see a very apolar surface where the water droplets are unable to wet it onto. And you may recognize this picture because it is basically what you have when you have freshly waxed your car. The wax is very apolar and it makes the surface repellent to the water, and therefore the water is unable to wet onto the surface and it can just flow away from your freshly shined car. This may be what you want for a car, but it clearly is not what we want for an adhesive. Because for an adhesive, we want to be all the way on the left-hand side. And you can see here a very polar surface, which matches very well with the polarity of the water. So therefore, the water is able to completely wet the surface. And this is obviously what we want to happen in real life. So we do not have the flexibility of the choosing the polarity of the substrate, but we do have the freedom to pick the polarity of the adhesive. So in this picture here, we can conclude that matching polarity of the adhesive with the substrate is very critical. So if we then come back to the surfaces to be labeled, we discussed the smoothness part, but again, we have to consider the polarity as well. And for polar surfaces, you have to consider materials such as glass, polyester, but also metals and stainless steel. These are very polar and they are relatively easy to stick to. If you have apolar surfaces, you have to think about plastics like polypropylene, polyethylene. And these are relatively more difficult to stick to because they are very apolar in nature. Obviously, if we then go towards the right-hand side here, when we combine apolar surfaces with more rough surfaces or undulation, clearly the adhesive needs to do a lot more work to overcome the irregularities of the substrate, and wetting becomes even more important. And that's why, it's one of the reasons I would say, why we have such a variety of adhesives, because in reality, polarity as well as surface roughness depends very much from application to application. The second item I will discuss in detail is the temperature. Again, this is a very important criteria to select, and we could also see that from the feedback in the polls. For adhesives, we basically consider two temperatures to be of importance. One is the minimum application temperature. This is the lowest temperature at which the label is possible to stick onto the substrate. The second temperature is the surface temperature range. So this is a range of temperatures, and that basically tells you the temperature range at which the label will remain stuck to the substrate during the expected lifetime. Typically, minimum application temperatures, they vary probably, from the very extreme, from -50 all the way to something like 40 degrees. Surface temperature range can be much broader. We can literally go down to -200 degrees all the way up to +150 degrees. Because when the adhesive is already bonded to the substrate, it can withstand a much more broader temperature range than during application. And I will show you why that is in the next slide. The application temperature is let's say it's governed by the way that we design the adhesive, and every adhesive is designed to perform at a certain application temperature. And what I'm showing you here are 3 different adhesives. So we have a room temperature adhesive, a chilled food adhesive, and a deep freeze adhesive. And what I'm showing you here is the tech of the adhesive, let's say the power of the adhesive as a function of the temperature. So if we consider the room temperature adhesive, is the red line here. At ambient conditions, it has the highest tech. If we go then towards lower temperatures, let's say +5 degrees, you can see that the tech is maximized. After this point, you can see a very rapid decrease of tech versus temperature. And this is very typical for every adhesive that you will use. Because after the optimal tech of the adhesive, the material becomes glassy and it will lose 2 things. One of them is its ability to flow onto the substrate, and the second one is it becomes glassy, so meaning non-tacky. So if we then look at the deep freeze adhesive, you can see that at ambient conditions, it actually has the lowest tech. But if you then go towards lower temperatures, let's say -10, this adhesive actually has its highest tech. And again, if we drop the temperature lower than its minimum application temperature, you can see a rapid decrease of performance. So the 2 takeaways here are you cannot readily judge the adhesive for its ultimate performance always at one temperature. You really have to take into account the minimum application temperature, because this is the temperature at which the adhesive will obtain its maximum tech. The second interesting point to learn here is that a deep freeze adhesive, while being very sticky at low temperatures, actually can be a very good removable at ambient conditions. So again, even if you have no firm points from an end user on what the final adhesive requirements are, then 3 points are always very important to consider. One being the minimum application temperature at which the adhesive needs to stick onto the substrate. The second one is the roughness of the substrate itself, and finally the polarity of the substrate. With these 3 points, you have a very good handle on the choice of the adhesive that you have to consider. If you then add the additional requirements, such as UV stability, food approval, or perhaps removability into the picture, then you have a pretty good handle on what adhesive you have to recommend for the end use. And with that, Natalia, I hand it back to you.
Thank you very much, René. To summarize, we are here to help you. And adhesive choice or adhesive journey is not an easy one. Otherwise, we wouldn't have so many specialists working on that. So you are not there alone. Do please reach out to your sales representative or to the technical sales team that we have in each and every region, because these are the specialists that know how the application lines work. They can learn something from you in terms of printing, for instance, but they really know very well how to guide you with the help of the adhesive selection. Just to also remind you, I mean, we are in this industry for more than 85 years and have all the technologies available in-house as well as global reach. So we are here to support you, and we have the tools. What we need is purely questions from your side. And I must really thank you, because we have quite some questions. You have been very active. Thank you for that. That it means we are not alone, because we only see 3 of us, but apparently there are more behind. So thank you for that. With this, I believe we can go to the question and answer in a part, right?
Correct, yes.
So if you can move maybe to the next one, and now we'll have a look at the questions. So we have quite some questions being asked. So Nick, you had a question regarding water-based acrylic. So there, I believe you refer to emulsion acrylic. I don't know if you would like to confirm, please do so. Or Renee, would you like to add something?
The question number one about the water-based acrylic, that was answered. The second one is from Phil. What adhesive can I use for direct food contact? Many of our adhesives are suited for direct food contact. In fact, when you look at our compliance site on the website, there is actually a list of all the adhesives which have food compliance. Like I said, many of our adhesives have direct food compliance, and we have a range of adhesives which are also suited for direct contact onto fatty food, because this is one of the key requirements and one of the key questions that we get most often. Two of the adhesives that immediately come to mind are S692N. That adhesive can be used with a reduction factor of 2. And we also have our TrueCut adhesive S2000NG, which has a reduction factor of 3, that can also be used in direct food applications on fatty food.
Yeah, thank you, Renee. I've included into the comment of Phil the link as well. And maybe, Justin, I can ask you to enable the chat. So I will post to everybody these 2 links where you can find the certificates. Yeah. And then based on the requirements that you need, you can either search for the food certificate, an adhesive that comes with it, or any other type of certification that you want to. What I will also do, I will share with you the link to the adhesive animation that I mentioned in the beginning. So Justina, just tell me when you have the chat available. Okay, so if you can see, this is, please open it after the webinar in order not to interrupt, because potentially we'll have some noises, but at least you'll have that. And another one I will give you, this is related to the certificates. This one is specific to food compliance, so you can find more there. But again, if you play around, you will see that there is more details. You can also ask for personalized statement, or you can ask for more questions from that specific compliance team. All right. Okay, then there were more questions regarding what is the best application of adhesive on plastic, mainly for automotive industry. So as Renee just mentioned to you, only plastic is not the only criteria, there are many more. So what I've also included the link to a specific part where we talk about durables and automotive solutions. So I would really encourage you to go into that link and to understand better for yourself what type of plastics are you talking about and what are the conditions. If Renee, would you agree, or is there anything you would like to add?
No, absolutely. Yeah. On one of these pages, you actually find a very good overview of the 6 key adhesives that we have for the automotive industry, and you can find back the criteria that I've used as well. So the surface energy is obviously very critical, as well as the roughness, and thirdly the durability of these labels. So you will find a very elaborate information on these adhesives on our website. Yeah.
Thank you, Renee. Then I have another 2 questions. So one is around home compostable adhesive, home compostable material. We have adhesive development for industrial composting. So that one we can offer to you and disclose. The home composting, it's a new trend. We know that that's start to happen. At this moment, it's very limited to specific regions in Europe. So we are closely monitoring, and we will evaluate and see whether there is a need for that. So if you have a specific interest and more details, I would encourage you to share maybe through an email to us or to your sales contact. And a question to you, Renee, is around what adhesive can I use for alcoholic labels? So I assume this is alcoholic beverage and labeling of those, and specifically anti-humidity.
Yeah, then our key recommendation would be our clear cut adhesive, which has very good resistance towards water as well as alcohol. Another option would be our S4000N adhesive, which is a premium clear on clear adhesive product with very good moisture resistance. And for the ultimate, let's say, non-water whitening, then we would recommend our UV acrylic adhesive. For example, the 3100 adhesive. That one basically is non-water whitening under any condition.
Yeah, thank you, Renee. Also, an important point to mention is that it has been the case in the last years. It shouldn't be the case anymore, but ensuring that you have air knives on the bottling line is critical to because adhesive doesn't like water normally. And then you can create the issues of water whitening potentially. So you really need to ensure that you have these air knives to blow off this moisture, and then the labeling should be easier. So maybe sometimes it's not the trick of a label, but the trick of adjustment of the equipment that is there in place that you need to look at. Okay, what else do we have? Let's see.
Nimesh has asked the question, what is the difference between an emulsion acrylic and a hot melt acrylic adhesive? This is an interesting question. An emulsion acrylic adhesive is basically an adhesive that we coat out of water. So this is an emulsion, and this is an emulsified polymer. When we have a hot melt acrylic, we apply it as a hot melt adhesive, and then the material is cured on the web. So hot melt acrylics, they have extremely good water whitening performance, and we can also tailor durable properties into these products. They are more expensive than emulsion acrylic products, but this is well made up for their unique abilities in both durability as well as removability.
Thank you, Renee. You're very active. Thank you very much. So let's see. Another question is there an adhesive to stick to already frozen apolar surfaces? So we have indeed a range of deep freeze adhesives and a range also that are even cryogenic adhesives that really go way below 0 degrees. So here I would simply, I think we would need to have a further conversation to understand what segments are you referring to, and what type of surface are you referring to. So on the same page, at the same adhesive page that I've shared with you, there is a list of cold temperature adhesives. So maybe your answer is already there. I would encourage you to look into that. I can reshare with you the link again. If Renee, if you would like to look at the question, I will at least get the link out of here.
Yes. Another question from Nimesh is again on the acrylics, and then is on the rubber. Is there a difference between an emulsion rubber-based and a hot melt rubber-based adhesive? Yes, there certainly is. We only, as Avery Dennison, are supplying hot melt rubber-based adhesives. The emulsion rubber-based adhesives are often based on natural products and therefore are variable in nature and sometimes difficult to obtain food approval on. Hot melt rubbers are basically materials which are consisting of a rubber, a resin, and a plasticizer, and they are applied hot. The emulsion rubber-based adhesives are basically emulsified hot melts. So they are applied wet onto the liner and then dried before being laminated to the face stock. Yes, they are essentially very different adhesives.
Yeah. There is another question I would like to take. We are getting short of time. There is one. The question was regarding R100 adhesive and its sustainability, a possibility of recycling of it into the either plastic or paper recycling stream. So here I would like to mention the following. So if you look at the just at the paper or film, yes, you could potentially recycle that together. However, the system, the infrastructure as we have nowadays in Europe is not looking at the label as as a recycling material. It's a relatively small percentage versus the complete bag. So the focus is on the recycling of the packaging itself. So glass bottle, PET bottle, flexible packaging is not even started. So it's only starting up. Label is more disregarded as a part of the waste. So at this moment, the primary focus is for the label for adhesive to ensure clean removability. So at least you don't get any contamination on the packaging, on the product itself. That's the role of the label. If the infrastructure, if the recycling system is getting more better and advanced, then of course potentially you would be able to take these fractions and recycle them together. But at this moment, this is not the case. So we still are, the recycling industry is still developing, and at this moment, this is being disregarded as more the waste and is being used for the energy recovery, so is being burned. So, I mean, but maybe in the year 2 or 3 from now, there will be a positive trend into that. Justina, I am mindful of time.
Yes, absolutely.
I believe we should be able to answer these questions through the emails afterwards or not?
So all the questions that we did not manage to answer right now will be able to follow up after the session. And I've seen a few questions about the slide deck. So yes, it will be shared with you after the presentation. So you'll receive it by the end of today, and you'll also receive the recording of today's session.
Last but not least, before Justina finalizes, please feel free to reach out to us, and we will connect you with the right product managers, for instance, for the specific segments, because I saw there are quite some automotive questions in there. There is some connected to recycling, so we will help and guide you through. Just an apologies if we didn't manage to answer all of those, but thank you very much for joining.
Thank you. And if you are interested in the topic of adhesives, especially in the pharma industry, we've got another session on the 30th of June at 2 p.m. where the pharma team will be covering what adhesives and face stocks to choose for the particular pharma applications. Once you receive the slide deck, you will have a link to register for that session as well. Well, thank you for your attendance. Thank you, Renee, and thank you, Natalia, and we'll follow up the rest of the questions after the session. Thank you all.
Thank you.
See you next time. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.